All right, now I see you. Now I see you.
We are live.
Okay, welcome to our second episode of Game of Fintech, the impact of Fintech on smart cities. I'm your host. My name is Alia Noor, and I'm working at Ahmed Al Akbari Chartered Accountants as associate partner, and I'm also holding position of director training at Alif Technologies and director VAT at Leading Edge Alliance Tech Consult. I'm the founder of Experts League. Experts League is a free platform. Experts League is a free platform where you can access latest practices, updates, innovations in the fields of fintech, audit, tax, and finance, with the vision of maximizing time efficiency by connecting industry globally acclaimed experts to share their success stories, opinions, advice, and best practice. Where everything is connected, where you can learn how to think like an outthinker. The Game of Fintech gives you the latest development in fintech space, industry giant players, current moves, and challenges, how to survive or thrive in this environment. So this second episode of FinTech is based on impact of FinTech on smart cities. And with our smart speakers, we have Dr. Ingrid and Mr. Silvio Frank, who will be presenting their expert views shortly. There was never a bigger or greater TV show in history than Game of Thrones that spanned over 8 seasons. What had captivated the audience around the world for 8 seasons? The story of battles at two fronts: the war for control of the Iron Throne among powerful families, kings and queens, knights and renegades, waged war against each other in order to gain control over the mythical land of Westeros. War against the army of death and the rising forces after millenniums which threatened the existence of living men. The season has ended, but the winter is here, and so the game of winter. But how does it all begin? So let's go back in time. Can you see the screen? Dr. Ingrid? You can see the screen? Okay. So let's go way, way back in time. Once upon a time, life was simple. Humans hunted, gathered food, they fought disease. Wait a minute. Life continued like that for 12,000 years. Then what happened? Then we reached a turning point in the 17th century. According to anthropologists, the most significant change in the way of living and thinking, that was called the agriculture revolution. There were two behavioral shifts ignited. The momental change. We start farming food, crops, and animals for nutrition. We understood the vital importance of personal hygiene. It vastly improved our living conditions. The historians call it the dawn of civilization. Then in 18th century, the second revolution happened. That's called the Industrial Revolution, came up with full speed. The steam engine gave it power. It fueled rapid economic progression. Manufacturing became more efficient. Factories shoot up like mushrooms. Masses of workers came searching for jobs. It led to rapid growth of urban areas. Then we reached third revolutionary turning point. It all started in the 17th century, a digital revolution. Life on Earth exploded in both good ways and bad ways. There has been rush of new technologies, agricultural technology, robotic technology, energy technology, communication technology. Then what happened next? In 2008, world faced global financial crisis. Following the crisis, the financial crisis, the US, EU, and other jurisdictions faced considerable societal pressure that never again the world will face. Financial institutions pose a systematic risk to the economy or the financial system that never again would taxpayer money would be used to bail out failing financial institutions. Here the game of fintech started. Financial crisis influenced millenniums towards the fintech revolution. The global financial crisis and subsequent Great Recession influenced younger generation of millennials. And today, financial crisis is seen as having taken place at the intersection between weakening of traditional financial service provider and rise of new technologies that led millenniums to the development of what is known as fintech. These fintech companies aim to provide clear alternatives to traditional financial service providers models, and they're reshaping the financial service landscape of the future. There's no shelter from the storm. What was considered new and disruptive has become the norm and prerequisite for all players. Science fiction has become a science fact with these digital innovations: blockchain, big data, artificial intelligence, predictive analysis, and Internet of Things. So welcome to the age of information, where everything is structured and unstructured, large and complicated data sets. Information and contents are too much to choose from. Every minute you are bombarded with a lot of information. Nothing flows freely than information. It means that information is spread faster than ever. It has changed how buyers read, shop, and process information. If data is the new oil, artificial is the new electricity. And the Internet of Things has made it more easy and more accessible. Internet of Things are the system of interrelated computer devices, mechanical and digital machines provided with unique identification, and they are able to transfer data from a network without requiring human to human or human to computer interaction. Data and smart devices power our everyday lives, from adjustment of our thermostat to the exchange of funds between a business and a consumer. And it is estimated that 4.16 billion Internet of Things are expected to be in the world by 2025. Some of the daily uses are point of sale, taxi, hotel we are using like Square, Uber, Airbnb, robotics, Siri, Cortana, Watson, Alexa, and Web. With these fintech technologies, artificial intelligence, machine language, big data, smarter search algorithm, 3D graphics, connectivity, 5Gs, Internet of Things, semantic website. Web 3.0 is the next generation of internet technology. It will use these fintech developments to create intelligent websites and web applications to provide more personalized and relevant information at a faster rate. But what is the relationship between the fintech and smart cities? A smart city is a term used to describe a municipal ecosystem where technology, innovation, and collaboration intersect to create improved civic services and enhanced quality of life for citizens. Can you guess how many people move to city every week? Not 100, not 1,000, but more than 1 million. Globally, there are 1.3 million people moving to cities every single week. What does this convey? It conveys intensive urbanization and industrialization. That's why the future of urban development depends on smart cities. By 2020, according to UN World Population Report, about 70% of people are expected to live in metropolitan. That will create issues of urbanizations. The bright side of moving to urban development areas: better living standards, higher income, improved social and cultural integration. But there is a dark side: congestion, high energy consumption, water crisis, spread of infectious disease. And that's why, coronavirus spread so rapidly in cities. And in pandemic, it has helped us. And smart cities can defend against these pandemics by disease tracking, autonomous delivery, geolocation, drone surveillance, thermal cameras, internet connectivity. The top growth cities has already begun. The game has begun, and the top cities of the world are Singapore, Dubai, Oslo, Copenhagen, Boston, Amsterdam, New York, London, Barcelona, and Hong Kong. So let's start the game of fintech with our prestigious smart speakers. Let me give you a brief introduction about our speakers. We have with us Silvio Frank Popo. He's the Managing Director of Logos Capital Latin Lead GBA USA. Mr. Silva is a sister city ambassador for the city of Miami and is featured as a resilient smart city. He's proactive in civic engagement and diversity as the youngest board member in the city of Miami. He's appointed to the Mayor's International Council to build new sister city parameters. Having lived, studied, and worked throughout Asia, Europe, US, and Latin America, Mr. Silvio has harvested cultural viewpoints for understanding, communication, and coordination across the increasingly globalized world. He has received a global education in international finance and philosophy with degrees from University of Florida, Milan University, and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So welcome to Experts League second episode, Mr. Silvio.
Thank you for having me so much, Alia. It's great to be here.
Would you like to introduce something else about yourself?
I think that even though we're talking a lot about technology, I really appreciate nature and think that a lot of technology would probably go back to the old way. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later on. So, just thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are most privileged to have you on board. And another prestigious guest is Dr. Ingrid, our famous Miss Dr. Ingrid. She's also our member of Expert League. Dr. Ingrid, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to participate in this great event. I serve multiple roles. Today, I am proud to represent Government Blockchain Association. I'm their Chief Ethics Officer. I also serve as a senator for the World Business Angel Investment Forum and the country director for the United States. Additionally, I'm a passionate digital advocate, so I hope today to convey some of that to our audience. I am very much involved not only with blockchain, but also with artificial intelligence, quantum, and other emerging technologies. So I hope today we can share with the audience some of our thoughts about smart cities and why we believe that we can all contribute to enhancing that major push we're seeing towards smart cities internationally. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ingrid. So over to you, Dr. Ingrid. We'll start from you. So you have the screen.
I'll share real quick. I think you have to stop yours so that we don't have two screens.
Yeah, please.
No problem.
Yeah, sure.
And please let me know if you are not able to see it well. Otherwise, I'll maximize the screen and we'll proceed. Are you able to see it well? Perfect.
Yes.
So our presentation will be divided in three. First, I'll just share a few global landscape data sets that I think are meaningful for the audience to be aware of. Then we'll focus on digital identity. And then Silvio will focus on a very important use case that we believe is one of the key drivers for smart cities internationally. As you already highlighted, Alia, we just wanted to make sure that when we talk about smart cities, everybody has the same definition. And the most universally used is a very simple one. It's to leverage technology in order to increase efficiency, improve citizen experience, and optimize quality of life. The market size expected and estimated by recent reports is quite staggering. The global fintech market is supposed to grow at KGR 22.17, and the global smart cities market at 14.8. The total value in billions of dollars is quite astonishing as well. What is the value proposition though? And that I think is even more impressive. The ancillary business opportunities generated by smart cities can reach an estimated $1.56 trillion by 2025. And I think we all agree that the pandemic has accelerated this space. So it's highly likely that experts, when they publish these numbers next year, will augment them. You already highlighted a few characteristics of smart cities, so I'm not gonna stay too long on this slide, but I thought it's important to understand that each of these elements in most experts' opinions is equally important. If you just develop one, the ecosystem will not function well. So all of us have to contribute to work together to have smart governance, smart energy, buildings, mobility, infrastructure, finance, and obviously healthcare, which we always knew, but the pandemic has highlighted this to more stakeholders. Also, I think it's relevant to understand the impact of fintech in the whole ecosystem. And we'll touch on a few of these things today during our conversation and our presentations, but I just thought it's nice to have them listed and to see the broad portfolio of elements that contribute to smart cities through fintech. And you can see them on the screen. However, I would like to highlight that infrastructure and architecture are really important. With the pandemic, we've also seen literally an exponential adoption in digital and contactless payments. When you look at the adoption just a year ago compared to now, you see a sharp rise. And I think that's going to continue based on the current data we're seeing. Of course, also digital currency and digital assets exchanges. We've seen the European Central Bank and World Bank pushing hard towards these kind of developments. So I think over the next few years, we'll see a total reshifting of that landscape. And transportation, I think Silvia will touch a little bit on that in the use case, but that's another huge important domain that all of us will have to contribute towards on an international level in order to make smart cities work. The other imperative is for us to understand the funding mechanisms for this. In order to have a sustainable smart cities model, and this to not just be a trend, we have to have funding models that can be available to all, and long-term sustainability is key. We'll touch a little bit on it throughout our presentation today, but the full portfolio spans from private investments to public-private partnerships. A lot of special development funds have been created even this year. And I think we also see the last 2 quarters an increase in impact and purpose investing. So now I'll focus much more on digital identity. And the reason why I thought that's important and why I've dedicated the last 2 years towards this specific issue is because I do believe that digital identity can be the foundation and the catalyst for fintech and smart cities. And again, before we go into the details, I just wanted to make sure we all have the same definition. When we say entity, we are talking about a person, an organization, application, or device. And that's really important to understand that if I log into multiple devices today, throughout my day, I might log into 5 or 6 devices. I'm creating separate versions of that identity. And that's really important when we talk about implications for healthcare, finances, legal, and other relevant elements. It also includes multiple formats, such as electronic signature, seals, timestamps, and other elements. It's not just the typical identity that most of us think about when we think about paper identity. Here are some stats. I know, Alia, you already showed a few, but I think no matter what source you're looking at, the numbers are impressive. I've seen multiple sources. This is just one in addition to the one you showed, but either one shows that by 2050, 68% will live in urban areas. I think yours from the United Nations showed 70, so very close. And currently 1.1 billion people worldwide live without digital identity. That's impressive, and we hope to change that. What is very near and dear to my heart, as most of you know, I care a lot about children, and 1 in 4 children under 5 years old do not officially exist at all. And that's only what we know about. So that's why I do believe that focusing on digital identity not only can help us today, but also can ensure that we're doing a better job in the next decade for all these domains we addressed. When we look at everything that's published about digital identity over the last few years, I've selected a few hot topics and key elements that most experts believe are crucial if we want to be successful. And self-sovereignty is one. Not only experts, but also the international organizations that try to and have pledged to improve digital identity globally have put a lot of effort into trying to see how we can make self-sovereignty work. It's not easy, but I think there are some options there, particularly with ledger technology. We have more chances than ever. Cross-border validity and reciprocity is a must. If we just develop the most amazing systems in silos, it's not going to work. Privacy is, again, an imperative and something that, again, I'm very focused on. Security, interoperability, and technical architecture design and standards that we can all use internationally. The same way like now we expect to be able to pay with a credit card wherever we go in the world, the same way we would expect to use our digital identity across the world. And another topic that's near and dear to my heart is digital twins. I know it's been overused sometimes, but I do believe for healthcare, we have some unique opportunities. And for smart cities, that could be one of the first things. I know most of you are probably aware, we've seen health passports recently. That's just one example how we can leverage some of these concepts. So what are some characteristics we would hope, and I just selected a few, but these are 4 that are considered essential. So we hope that the digital identities we create globally can be private, of course, portable, persistent, and personal. These are essential characteristics that we have to master on a global level. Otherwise, it's not going to work for long term. Then I do believe, and not only me, but many experts that have published reports lately, that digital identity can be an enabler, an enhancer, a connector, and a gateway, not only for fintech, but also for smart cities, which is why we're talking about it today. The overall value proposition that digital identity can bring is quite evident, but I would like to highlight that it's actually a human right. Like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, people don't even exist without a digital identity in this modern world. So it is a human right to have a digital identity. It gives access to essential services such as energy, water, shelter. It can also be a conduit for a better education system and access for millions and tens of millions of people around the world that otherwise would not be able to access any education, let alone affordable education. It can also foster economic development on a global scale and facilitate actually almost every single SDG goal can be facilitated by having a digital identity system that's globally sustainable. Here are just some impact domains that we've noticed tremendous adoption over the last year, again, due to the pandemic, for the wrong reasons, unfortunately, but we're gonna try to see the silver lining in this. We've seen an increase in adoption of technology and digital identities in multiple domains such as government services, healthcare, sanitation, energy, and transportation. These are some elements of success. So when you look at cities that have been successful, these are some of the elements that they tried to deploy, not only converging emergent technology, but also hybrid deployment, which is really important. Stakeholder consortiums, because we cannot do anything in silos when we talk about smart cities. That's one of the recurring themes we have noticed. And then a multi-channel approach. We have to also mention barriers to adoption. I think we all agree there's still some resistance to change in many places in the world. We have massive regulatory hurdles to overcome that when you start to look at them, sometimes it can feel disheartening. But I think if we all collaborate on a global level, we can tackle this. And then, of course, like always, socioeconomic barriers. I already mentioned some of the drivers of success, but drivers of adoption are a little bit different. Tech companies, governments, and banks can work together. I think we're going to notice a push, though, from a just natural occurrence of the demographic subsets that are going to be the key in the global economy for the next years. Millennials, Gen Zs, and the Gen Alphas are the ones that are accustomed to live in digital identities, and they're not going to even have any other way they can imagine. So we all feel that that will be a major driver of adoption. Hot topics that we see in major publications that address smart cities, besides privacy and interoperability, which I referenced before, biometrics, tremendous development. If we can make it more affordable, biometrics can lead to huge adoption and higher privacy, but unfortunately the cost curve is still quite steep to deploy that at a large scale. Anti-money laundering regulations have been passed just this last year that can actually be a conduit to develop digital identities at a faster pace than before. And then, like I referenced already just a little bit for healthcare, but digital identity passports can be conceived not only for healthcare, but for many other domains that are meaningful, such as travel in this kind of environment and other industries. So this concludes my presentation. I wanted to just leave our audience with some future direction thoughts that we all need to consider. We're advancing heavily towards a full digital economy. And I think digital identity over the next decade can become a digital identity as a service. With the emerging technologies we have at our fingertips right now, it seems that it might be a possibility. And now I wanted to make sure I spend some time allowing Silvio to share his thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
Wow, that was excellent. Thank you so much. That's great. And I think that it plays off really well off of Ms. Noor's introduction on the whole story to Smart City and sort of the evolution from the beginning of time. I was pleasantly surprised to see that beginning. Should I present my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we will do that. Screen share. 1 second. Okay, and I think we are good. All right. Let me know if you see. Let me see if you see the screen now.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great. So, like I mentioned earlier, my name's Silvio. There are a couple of obstacles. I mean, right now here in Miami, I've been leading the efforts to build some smart city projects at a county level, which incorporates multiple cities. City of Miami, where I'm on the board of the mayor for global competitiveness, or one of the goals is to build sister city alliances with other cities around the world. So one of the conversations we're working on is building, for example, a sister city partnership with places like Dubai. And like Alia, you were mentioning earlier, there are a few leading smart cities around the world. And those are the ones that we're looking to connect with sometime now. So we can have an alliance of smart cities and then have a test bed of smart cities. So in order to get there, right, there are a couple of different steps that we're going to need. And there are different stakeholders that need to be involved in order to buy into what is truly possible in terms of getting to this idea of building a smart city. First, you have to break it down into different pieces. Then you have the transition of many points to get to a larger smart city. And there are a few baby steps that I think are needed to get in the way. And most importantly, to get there are going to be two main elements that we got to consider is how do we fund smart cities? How do we finance the evolution of these smart cities? I mean, we've had a lot of these challenges in places here like Miami, where, you know, you go through the government process, it takes a long time. If you go through the private process, you know, who's going to pay for the feasibility? How are you going to do this, right? Are you going to do a public-private partnership? Is it going to be full private? Are you going to do contract someone to do it and do a public tender? A lot of questions come up in terms of actually how to build out and get a smart city done. And besides just the technology and innovation that people like you, Ingrid, and I are working on with the Government Blockchain Association to adopt into the system, ultimately is how do we get there? So that's going to be something we're going to be talking about today. And I am trying to move on to the next slide here. Give me 1 second. Okay, it's not going on to the next slide. Bear with me. All right, sorry guys. So on that topic, right, the first thing we'll get into, and I just got to go into presentation mode here. My apologies. Why isn't it working for us here? Okay, here we go. There. I think one thing that's really important when we're thinking about smart city, and I'll make this more personal about the example that we're doing a little bit in Miami, just to make it more palatable, more concrete example of of what's happening is that smart cities, like Ingrid mentioned earlier, are going to be very dependent on digital wallets and digital identities, right? All of this is important because it's not just people, places, things, everything will have its own ID, but the interconnection of transportation across the world. And before and historically, right, you used to have the physical flow of goods or of people. You had the information of the flow of such goods or such people, and subsequently the payment to be able to get the flow of things or people across. These are all desperate things, and we're seeing that although they've been separate for a long time, they're coming together. Here's a very important point to get across is that transportation and how you move through a smart city is really, really one of the things and one of the main obstacles and that we're going to have to face, and that IoT will be able to help us unlock a new set of opportunities in. Here are some of the generic models. We'll talk about some different options to be able to fund a smart city. And then we'll talk a little bit about the fintech things that are involved and the different fintech products we're seeing and economics as a whole that's changing within finance. So historically, most people most states, I should say, are funding these smart cities with public funds. So 11% public and private funds, doing these public-private partnerships or a combination. 44%, this is pretty private, just 10%. Give you an idea of like different combinations of how people are using it. We'll see that ultimately funding a smart city involves all kinds of stakeholders. You need the venture capitalists there to support the entrepreneurs. You need the universities there to serve as a test bed. You need the government funding the right kind of environment and the web servers and things that allow a sufficient ecosystem to make that possible. So you do need to have multiple actors together playing different roles of the economic life cycle, both for the people as well as for the products and ideas and innovation that are incubated in that smart city. You have a few phases to consider. Of course, is the ideation phase. Then okay, what are going to be our options? Once we understand is smart city valuable, and then ultimately then determining how you're going to execute on delivering the best way to fund or start your project. So I want to talk about project finance as a couple of different options that are being used today. And there are different ways, and fintech is disrupting each and every one of these different sections as it is today. Government, for example, a financing option where the government, is the one that funds the project directly and gets involved, is being streamlined by things like blockchain technology. Groups like the U.S. government and Department of Homeland Security are investing in blockchain for different types of things, more for the movement of good, like where your construction and operations and how long is it taking for you to do. As Alia was mentioning, things like Web 3.0 or spatial web are going to make it much faster and much more efficient for us to see how goods are actually built in real time. Project finance was one of our specialties. This is usually used in things like oil fields, infrastructure, power plants, which is all the funds go into a specific project. This is what's called a special purpose vehicle, as you can see in the middle of the slide. And so the government will put in its portion, right, that usually will serve as the basis to either get the project going as well as get everything up. And then the rest is going into an SPV. Or in some cases, right, someone will come and say, hey, look, we'll be able to develop this whole section of the smart city. We'll give away wallets to all your residents and all your enterprises, as was the case with Digital Town, one of the first smart publicly traded smart city companies, which I was on the board for. And they would come in and they would buy the domain from the city. They'd give the government a royalty, and the shareholders would then finance the project and then the rollout of in the community, without the government really having to do too much or the public sector having to do too much. So those are also ideal. Obviously, situations that would get you the fastest are the third, right? So in terms of getting able to get a smart city up and running, corporate finance would probably be the fastest, project finance the second fastest, and lastly, government. And of course, you have joint ventures, right, between the public and the private sector, and how those things might work to bring the assets of both sides together to implement a special project and and that's also happening. Another area to consider for smart cities and finance in general and digitization with fintech are things like bonds. The bond market is a multi-trillion-dollar market, $3.8 trillion market cap, which really puts in perspective what Ingrid was mentioning earlier about the size, right? The trillion-dollar opportunity that smart cities are going to offer, right? Talking about $3.8 trillion municipal bond market. Bonds will be digitized. We'll be talking a little bit about that. I'll give you some examples. And different levels of these public-private partnership sectors of engagement. So people say, okay, you know what? We are interested in doing the public-private partnership route, this PPP, let's say, for simplicity. And then these are the different areas that you can imagine are going to be streamlined and put forth. Whether you just bid and build something, or what's more common would be designed, build, finance, operate, and maintain, which is where a lot of the private sector is doing a whole full turnkey option and solution, is also what I'm working on as a CEO of Logos Capital, to be able to provide a full financing and turnkey solution that lets us build this, maintain it, and grow it. Here's one example of how others have done it before, right? But basically, this is just a public-private partnership and how you underwrite the whole process on the public and the private side. But this is not fintech enough. I think let's talk just a little bit about the different financing classifications, so we can think about how technology will affect each and every one of these different areas of capital. Somebody, I think this week, or is it last week, I forgot who it was, that said that they're having a conversation with their child, and that they were explaining to them that capital is like ice cream. Yes, wait with me. What do you mean capital is like ice cream? Yes, capital comes in all sorts of different flavors. And here we can see some of that. You have debt, senior, bonds, export credit, in some cases, even other more specifically things like mezzanine as you go more in the option here. Here you have to take things onto the balance sheet of the company, right? In hybrid approaches, you don't really need to take capital onto the balance sheet of the company, like vendor financing. One thing that we're doing now with a lot of purchase order financing and invoice financing, where just in the supply chain of the movement of goods, and this is especially important when you're thinking about multiple cities working together, right? Now we're able to buy the invoice or the purchase order or advance the money to somebody that has a contract that may be too large for them. So we issue that letter of credit through a bank in this case, and in the future, it won't necessarily be a bank. It'll be another financial institution that can act like a bank, to replace what's called the standby letter of credit. And that standby letter of credit will then go to the manufacturer and say, hello, manufacturer, we're committing to give you all the money that you need to compensate you irrevocably for these goods that you're going to produce for us to import into our city. And so there is no debt that the company has to take on, or the project or the smart city has to take on their balance sheet. This would all be able just through the PO that you can do this. So this is an awesome approach, something that is being in high demand right now because of cash flow constraints and to accelerate cash flow, which is also very possible, and an option that makes sense, especially when we look at export credit, when you're buying smart city solutions from places like, let's say, the US, that has the US Export-Import Bank, to be able to offer an export credit, an export guarantee, and then a contract from a government can serve as a bankable instrument to have vendor financing come in and fund at least the mobilization. Alternative lenders and specialty lenders make this possible. This is an increasingly growing field. They will be doing everything from lending just for your IoT device, or leasing for your electric vehicle, so you don't have to buy a car anymore. Now you can just lease it if you need it for a short-term stay, like an investment we made recently in that. That's also going to be asset-based, right? What's asset-based with IoT? What's asset-based with data? Something else that's going to be considered. And we'll look at another slide that talks about some of that. And then, of course, you have your multilateral financing options that are more viable to fund some smart cities and mobilization in emerging markets like Southeast Asia, for example, or Latin America or Africa. Multilateral financing is a real strong option and something that should be developed or tapped into. Then, of course, you have the infrastructure funds. Yes, IoT is one thing, but in the end, the roads are going to be embedded with technology. The roads are going to be embedded with sensors. We're already seeing it in places here like Miami. The Dutch, for example, are developing a lot of streets that glow in the dark already when the nighttime come, where cars will charge while they're driving on the road just because of the magnets that are put and the type of systems that are put into the physical infrastructure, which is a whole different types of requires a different type of financing altogether. You have your traditional equity, which people think about when you think about the soft banks of the world and the kind of checks that they're writing in terms of straight equity, and then a couple of other grant fundings, non-dilutive government fundings that really serve the base load. So knowing how to mix these and combine these things together for different types of projects, different areas of smart cities and how they work together and how fintech will advance all of these is a plethora of complication in and of itself. But I really just wanted to frame the conversation so you can see all the flavors of finance, if you will. There are more innovative things that we're going to be seeing that I'll be talking about, especially when it comes to the intersection of public and private. We're seeing, of course, the rise of green bonds, which many of you have heard about. But what I want to highlight when we're thinking about green bonds, when we're thinking about fintech, and we're thinking about smart cities, is that funding pools can automatically be governed by what are called decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. The Government Blockchain Association, and where Ingrid and I volunteer a lot of our time, we are already adopted the first decentralized autonomous organization, which can serve now to make decisions for the organization in logic. Green bonds, as you see, have to follow 4 principles. So follow along here when you think about the DAO. I'm going to project out. The DAO or a green bond can be itself intelligent. We raised something here in Miami called the Miami Forever Bond, hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to go into key infrastructure issues where Miami is maybe going underwater. We have to invest in pumps. So how do we make the decisions on where that money actually goes? Today, it's a manual process. Today, it's a human process. Today, it's a bureaucratic process. But going forward and into the future, this stuff will be automated and could go according to logistics of priority, right? We can say, hey, if we need more electricity output, then prioritize solar panels. If we need if we're still flooding our streets, then prioritize flooding. And you can automatically adjust the way that these bonds are done when you make them digital, following principles just like the green bonds follow of constricting the use of proceeds, the evaluation of the selection criteria, which will be much possible because of smart cities like and the IoT sensors and the data that they'll be capturing, right? Bonds will be able to automatically themselves be able to evaluate, determine which projects they should be selecting and prioritizing, right? And the reporting that fits the gap. It's a multi-billion-dollar market just on a traditional say. But here we'll see that there are different benefits that are going to come once you have the digitization of bonds. Well, what do I mean? Well, for one, you'll be able to trade bonds. This is now specifically in the bond market, right? You'll be able to trade them faster with more security and more affordably than what ultimately might be possible right now. Maybe even a fraction, right? And I think that this is the more interesting component. A fraction of the bond you can now purchase, where typically you would have to buy a whole $10 million bond or at least $1 million or something to be able to get involved in a municipal bond or any kind of bond for that matter. And now you can fractionalize this, right? So using blockchain technology, you can have a bond that's a $10 million bond, go into denominations of as little as $100 each, right? Making it much more easy for the local community to buy into that bond, to buy into the ownership, and for the community to decide maybe that they would want to issue their own bond for a project that is community focused. Something that's not possible today because it have to go through government could now enable crowdfunding for the communities to democratize and commercialize the solutions that they find are most important to them. So, and of course, this lowers the barrier of entry for everybody to be involved in being a real stakeholder in their community, being a real stakeholder in their smart city, and saying, hey, look, I want to go put money towards something that I think the smart city needs, and have other people communicate on your smart city to contribute money towards that becomes really possible. and of course, a lot cheaper to do. I'll give you one example of just this is not the future. This is already happening. Digital bonds have been happening. Mini municipal bonds, for example, has been the first way, which are been moving towards making these much more accessible for local communities to be involved. These mini municipals, like $25 to $1,000 denominations. Ben Bartlett, also a Government of Blockchain Association member and a committee member for the city of Berkeley, has been able to also issue a bond recently, focus but more on a Berkeley token and a digital bond. There are many people, for example, in places like Miami that are already working on a citywide token. One of the guys that volunteered brought me into the GBA talked to me about a future where all cities would have their own currency, because it would be able to grow and engage participation according to the future of that community, and reward peers for their data and their knowledge. You wouldn't pay people like Google to have your attention, right? The coffee shop down the street using a Miami token would pay you a percentage for your attention directly, right? You would be paid to watch the ad directly, not Google. And this sort of flips the whole economic model on its head as we think about solutions for this. And look at things like Denver, for example, showing out in their first hour with mini bonds of $500, raising $12 million to tackle a solution. Is incredible, the efficiency and things that are possible as a result of it. So many people are scared about funding smart cities, or thinking, where do we get started, or how do we get going in this conversation? And also the fear of the pilot, the chicken or the egg, to get something done. One thing that we're proposing is that we can set up what are pay for success models, and there'll be more and more possible to do this as time passes by. And the pay for success model allows investors and investor groups, right, that we can pull together to say, hey, look, Ingrid has an idea that she wants to create digital certificates of attendance and, let's say, participation at the schools from grade school to universities, and believes that this is going to improve school turnout and student improvement significantly. So to adopt this, and this could be one small project within a whole smart city or city of entities, but the funding can go up front, can fund it, and then based on the success of that model, can be paid out. So no more do people have to hesitate to say, hey, look, where do we get the capital to do this? Or if we don't have the capital, we shouldn't do it. Or no, with some capital commitment, you're able to set up payment mechanisms that allow anyone to develop a solution for your smart city, for whatever specific problem that the smart city might be trying to face or be trying to tackle, and then allow payments to work that way. So we can talk about that later on if you're interested. As for credit enhancements is another way, which I mentioned, right? Let's say we have a turnkey finance technology solution out of a place like the US. The US has US Exim Bank, and several others have equivalent banking systems and guarantors like Export-Import Bank of the United States. And so you're able to use that Export-Import Bank to then extend a facility to receive the financing to the buyer, to the city that wants to develop the smart city that's getting offered a turnkey solution. They don't even have to come out of pocket. They can pay it back over the lifeline of the asset. And when you pay it back, you think about, okay, how do we pay it back? Do we pay it back from tolls? Do we pay it back from, like, how do we do this? How do we start to pay back a long-term loan if we're adopting a smart city? And we need to think about some of the assets that are not being monetized and how smart cities can help us unlock new ways of making money, new ways of having revenue that aren't so much possible today. And what do I mean by that? I mean that automotive technology, IoT, and communications, they have different layers. Yes, you have the physical layer, right? What's called here the asset layer of the buses and the trucks and the cars, yeah. Then you also have the asset layer, the data layer. What's happening with the data computing, right? As I mentioned, right? If data is the new oil, then AI is where it's at. That's where the gold is. right? That's where the ultimate insights are going to be. But today, a lot of cities have a lot of data and they don't monetize on it. In the future, you'll be able to. If you have the right infrastructure set out, you'll be able to pay back some of this, not because you have tolls in the road, but because you have data that's generated and organized and that you can monetize and sell. So this changes the way that smart cities are able to finance themselves and fund themselves and build themselves and onto themselves in a way that's not really possible today unless you structure it the right way. We talked about this. We talked about now DeFi. There's a big phenomenon that's happening around the world, particularly at the intersection of blockchain, and the most popular of all in terms of financial technologies. And in this fintech, it's called DeFi. Now, what do we mean by DeFi? DeFi is decentralized finance. We remember, I haven't been a huge Bitcoin guy from the beginning, especially when we joined the Government Blockchain Association. I do understand its importance in national security, which is why we got associated and have been leading these efforts around the world with the Government Blockchain Association. One thing to take into consideration, though, is that in 2008, the financial crisis when Bitcoin was born, in that last financial crisis, now is the first financial crisis that we go to with having Bitcoin as an option. This is going to be the coming of age for Bitcoin and digital payments. DeFi makes it possible, like blockchain, like Bitcoin, to have a decentralized way of paying everything. So I'll give you an example of somebody that's actually building physical and using DeFi to make this possible. Crowdfunding some engines, making it possible with payments and to originate different work, understand who's tracking the project, when are the payments going to go to the project, who's making the payments, where are they going, how are they coming along. This decentralized finance aspect is what's called peer-to-peer. And peer-to-peer, what makes it less contingent on one bank or one person, and this decentralized component allows us as individuals, right, to be able to benefit from lending money to others or from money that is stagnant in an account, or to be able to be an alternative to banks that otherwise aren't so much the case. So decentralized finance is something to watch out for and to understand that there will be many implications throughout all of the different areas of finance, like I showed you earlier, and all the different layers. Special economic zones are going to be likely, if you haven't heard of these, are going to be what's set up to pilot some solutions in the jurisdictions that make it safe, because sometimes there's a lot of uncertainty around things like data privacy and data. So maybe a special economic zone that has its insulation, even within a city, is insulated with its own rules and its own sets to be able to build itself, are likely going to be what allows us to go from this transition to real future of smart cities as we imagine them. And it's also important that in this future of smart cities, we realize that there's going to be new economic models. There's one guy here called Brock Pierce that ran for president in the United States recently. His vice president was a lady that studied at London School of Economics under the original founder of this concept of time banking. And a solution like time banking, we have not evolved economic thinking. We're thinking about fintech. We're thinking about fintech within the context of neoclassical economics. And it's important for us to take a step back and understand, is neoclassical economics really the best? Neoclassical economics was the only one to challenge anything after Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. There was nothing for 100 years after Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations came out. And blockchain and DeFi are really some of the closest elements that are philosophically a paradigm shift towards this. Time banking is similar to that, and things like blockchain actually make it possible. What is time banking, and how could it help? Well, it would alleviate all poverty if it's adopted, for example, because instead of being paid with a dollar amount, you'd be able to contribute like for like. An hour of my time teaching you martial arts for an hour of Dr. Ingrid's time teaching me about quantum computing and data science, right? And this time banking would sort of is a new way, maybe even of systems thinking and economic change that don't exist yet, but that are coming. Of course, the flow of goods, information, and payments in one thing is a big deal that we want to take into consideration here in terms of finance and smart cities and what's going to be possible with smart cities. Hola, estoy en vivo. what's going to be possible in smart cities, or because of smart cities. And of course, then central bank digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies, as the Government Blockchain Association has been doing, and ourselves around the world, talking about these concepts of central bank digital currencies, is enabling groups like the Bahamas, like UAE, etc., that now will make payments all digital. So the kind of information and insights from the payments on the wallets that are coming around will change altogether in a way that we can't even fathom. So stay tuned for that, but do also follow what it is and how it's evolving. These are all examples of obviously us going more towards user-centric model, where the people are what's most important in the future of smart cities. And I think that in the end, people will be more empowered. People's voices will be more clear if we do things the right way now. And payments are a big part of that, to make sure that we stay wise. If you have some information, I have a QR code here on the screen. You can scan that, and I think it should take you to our website or my LinkedIn group or something like this. But email is best. LinkedIn, it takes me a while to get around to in terms of accepting messages. I'm incredibly honored to take place here in today's conversation alongside my colleague. And thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silva. That was a wonderful presentation. And we love the terminology, capital is an ice cream. Are you here?
Yes.
As a finance person, we loved it. So somebody from the audience has asked that is DeFi going to destroy commercial banks?
That's a great question. I mean, look, it's definitely going to compete against a lot of banking interests, especially now. But I don't think it's going to destroy commercial banking as we know it. I mean, banks play a really integral role. Someone once described banks to me as just financial, as groups with banking licenses, technology companies with banking licenses. DeFi in the end can only do so much because of the regulation and things that are coming onto them. But the people that are exploring decentralized finance or peer-to-peer lending in markets like Africa and Latin America or here in the US are doing so because the traditional banks already don't serve them. So it's not as if those banks are missing out on a new client or a new loan or a new vehicle. These banks are not doing it because they don't feel comfortable, because their liquidity ratios are being required by Basel requirements across the world, because there is no credit profile, because there's not enough credit history, et cetera, and so forth. So it's a first thing that people think about. Yes. This is going to be the end of banks. But in the end, no. It's really just filling in a gap that already exists that banks aren't filling.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Jacques, thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. Now let's have a quick outthinker session. So I'm going to ask both of you a few questions. So the first question is, what are the key pathways through which fintech can influence development of smart cities? Dr. Ingrid.
I think digital payments, like we mentioned, due to the current environment, that's probably going to be one of the key catalysts.
Okay, and Mr. Silvio. Mr. Silvio.
I think by simply just bringing transparency, right, to who's being paid and to who's being paid and how, as well as by enabling things like these digital bonds I mentioned earlier, democratizing access of the community to say what they think are the top priorities that they want their taxpayer money and their private money going to, in terms of major infrastructure and what would normally be just government decisions, become much more clearly transparent to happen at a user level.
Okay. The second question is, what is the impact of emergent technologies, 5G, IoT, web on fintech and smart cities? Dr. Ingrid.
I think the convergence of these technologies that you mentioned is going to be almost like when we had electricity several hundreds years ago. It's going to be the new decade. I like to say that even what we call digital era, we have to redefine, because these technologies will allow us to completely reshape and reorganize the way we have our global economy. And soon we have 6G. So I think even 5G is going to be displaced pretty quick.
Yeah,
But
and
I
we
think
have
it's
Web4 also.
yes, correct.
Dr. Silvio, Mr. Silvio.
So I think it's in a combine everything much more together, right? I mean, I think that for now, right, the information of movement, like I mentioned earlier, the flow of goods and people, the information of that flow, and then the payment of those things are all going to happen seamlessly. We'll just walk through things and payments are going to happen. We're not going to have to think about taking a wallet out or doing this or doing that. Everything's just going to happen seamlessly. I think that's what's going to happen with the emergence of all these with this
Connectivity. Everything is connected. Okay. The role of fintech innovation in fueling smart cities development. Dr. Ingrid.
I actually believe that that's going to be the major catalyst, not only for smart cities, but also for a digital economy. So I think fintech, if it likes to or not, is the crux of everything that we have to build from a digital economy perspective. And I think given the current push towards SDGs, I do believe that smart cities are an essential component of that digital economy.
If I don't
think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and I think particularly when we think fintech innovation, like we've noticed these days, innovation is transcending multiple industries, and all these converging emerging technologies are playing a huge role. So I think even within innovation, we've seen an innovative approach, agile in particular. And I think what we've noticed is that most organizations that are in fintech and are innovating are deploying combined AI, blockchain. Some of them are even in quantum. We've seen several banks and credit companies lately investing in quantum computing. We haven't touched on that, but I think the next decade or quarter century will be heavily influenced by quantum computing as well, which will bring us to a completely new level.
Yes. Silvio.
No, I want to echo really what Dr. Ingrid said. I think that in the end, fintech is going to just enable people further and enable us to really stay on track and look at the sustainable development goals, I think, as our imperative, and how we can measure the impact that we're having with our money. I think that's really one of the most important things that we can do, because money, as we know, is how we can continue voting even past the presidential election, where we can vote every single day with our money, and we do. And that vote has very serious consequences on the environment and on society in ways that either we are aware or that we're unaware. But that these things are not quantified is a big issue. And I think fintech will allow us to be more aware, to be more empowered, and also to have more insight into the real impact of where we're putting our everyday dollar.
It will bring more transparency.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the challenges, opportunities of fintech for smart cities? Dr. Ingrid.
I think the major one I had highlighted at the beginning, but if I have to pick only one, is regulatory hurdles. I think that's usually the biggest one in almost everything we try to achieve on a global scale. But for this, I think regulatory burdens and hurdles.
And what about you, Mr. Silvio?
Yeah, I think it's going to be how we fund the smart cities ultimately. How we fund the smart cities and how we structure the funding of the smart cities and the legal arrangements of smart cities between the stakeholders involved, and for how long we do that. I believe that it's probably going to be the major challenge. In electricity, without a doubt, smart cities are really relying on power, and I think that's going to create a new Achilles heel for cities. If an electronic magnetic pulse bomb goes off, for example, as a new cybersecurity threat. Between cybersecurity and being attacked on the energy grid, I think that we'll have just a whole new level of vulnerability that isn't possible today or isn't fathomable today, and that's only going to increase over time.
I think that was a very interesting discussion from doctor perspective and a finance perspective. As we are the finance person, we enjoyed the ice cream capital and we enjoyed the digital identity. I think that is the most important aspect. And in this current era, and we have seen in pandemics, the digital identity is very important. So the importance has been highlighted and enhanced in this era, and in coming future days, it will be more important, and it will be implemented across the world. So thank you so much, both of you, for the insightful and enlightening discussion. And if you would have more time, we would like to have more discussion with both of you. And hopefully participants have also enjoyed it, and hope to see you in another episode coming soon. So stay tuned with us for the Game of Fintech. Thank you, Dr. Ingrid, and thank you, Mr. Silvio.
Thank you, Mrs. Noor. Thank you, Dr. Ingrid.